So if you take a daily blood pressure pill at like 8 in the morning, it generally does exactly what it's supposed to do. Manages your hypertension, protects your heart, keeps your vascular system stable.
Right, it does its job perfectly.
Yeah, but, and this is wild, if you take that exact same dosage of that exact same pill at 8 at night, your kidneys might process it so differently that the drug either becomes, well, entirely ineffective, or it lingers in your bloodstream long enough to actually cause toxicity.
Which is a terrifying thought for anyone on daily medication.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into this hidden microscopic clock shop ticking away inside your internal organs. Specifically, we're looking at the circadian architecture of renal function.
Yeah, how your kidneys literally keep time.
Exactly. We're moving past that centralized master clock in the brain to look at how your kidneys independently track the hours. And we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of medical research today, mainly from the National Institutes of Health and Science Direct, examining the intricate clockwork inside renal cells.
And it really is intricate. We've been so heavily conditioned, I think, to view the human body's circadian rhythm as this strict top-down hierarchy.
Like the sun hits your eyes, the brain sees it, and yells at the rest of the body what to do.
Right, exactly. The brain issues the systemic commands. But the research we're unpacking today reveals a totally different reality. Organs like the kidney possess intrinsic molecular oscillators.
Meaning they have their own independent clocks.
Yeah, self-sustaining clocks in practically every single cell. They are capable of keeping a 24-hour rhythm completely in the dark, entirely independent of the brain.
I mean, I'm struggling a bit to understand the evolutionary benefit of that decentralized system.
Yeah.
Because, well, if the brain is already tracking the sun with absolute precision via the optic nerve, why on earth do our kidneys need their own independent clocks?
It seems redundant, right?
Yeah. Isn't a central singular clock just infinitely more efficient than trillions of localized cellular clocks?
Well, a central clock is efficient for systemic behavioral shifts, like waking up or feeling sleepy. But your internal organs are dealing with highly localized, immediate environmental variables.
Oh, I see.
Right, so the brain tracks the sun, but the kidney tracks your metabolic load. If you encounter an unexpected food source late in the day, or if you're doing some intense physical exertion that alters your hydration and electrolyte balance.
The kidney can't wait around for an email from the brain.
Exactly. It can't wait for a centralized, generic daily schedule to dictate its filtration rate. It needs local autonomy to anticipate and manage the specific metabolic demands placed on it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand what the kidney's clock controls, we have to understand how a single cell actually tells time without a watch.
And that gets us into the intrinsic molecular oscillator.
Right, the transcriptional translational feedback loop, or TTFL. To wrap my head around this, I started comparing it to like a self-regulating factory.
Okay, I like that. Walk me through it.
So inside the cell, you have these factory workers, two specific proteins called CLOCK and BMAL1. And their whole job is to promote the expression of genes by binding to the DNA.
Right. They are the transcription drivers. They fire up the assembly line.
Exactly. So the workers, CLOCK and BMAL1, they start building this giant cleanup machine. And in our biology, that machine is made of two other proteins called period and cryptochrome. PER and CRY.
Yeah, the PER and CRY proteins.
So the workers build the PER and CRY machine. But once the machine is built, it actually shuts down the whole factory. It's a negative feedback loop. The PER and CRY buildup, they physically block the workers from making anything else, and the factory goes dark.
Which is such a brilliant, elegant mechanism. They directly inhibit their own creation.
Right. But eventually the giant cleanup machine breaks down. The PER and CRY proteins degrade, the physical block on the DNA is gone, the workers wake back up, and the cycle just starts all over again.
That's a perfect analogy. And the biological marvel here, the thing that makes this a clock, is the strict temporal pacing of that degradation.
It takes a very specific amount of time.
Exactly. The synthesis, accumulation, the shutting down of the factory, and the eventual degradation of those PER and CRY proteins takes roughly 24 hours to complete.
Wow.
It functions as a perfect microscopic hourglass that continuously resets itself. And this is happening everywhere in the kidney. Practically every critical structural component is running this exact 24-hour factory loop.
Okay, so that microscopic factory is amazing. But, a single cell turning its DNA on and off doesn't actually filter blood.
No, it doesn't.
So what happens when we scale that up to the entire organ? How does that cellular ticking translate to the kidney's actual job of acting as the body's plumbing system?
Well, the CLSCK and BML1 proteins, your factory workers, they don't just build the PER and CRY repressor proteins. While the factory is on, they are simultaneously driving the rhythmic expression of thousands of other genes.
Like what?
Specifically, the genes that code for transporter proteins, things like NHE3 and the sodium-potassium pump, the NAC-AT paste.
Okay, so these are the actual physical pumps embedded in the cell membranes, the things moving sodium, potassium, and water out of the blood and into the urine, or vice versa.
Exactly. And because the factory workers are on a 24-hour shift, the expression of these pumps is on a 24-hour rhythm, which dictates the daily rhythms in plasma flow, tubular reabsorption, and the secretion of electrolytes.
Including the glomerular filtration rate, right, the GFR.
Yes, the GFR is heavily influenced by this.
Just to translate that medical jargon for a second, the GFR is essentially the body's baseline plumbing or filtering speed. And it's not just a static pipe. It changes based on the time of day because of these clocks.
Which is crucial, especially when we consider how this regulates the nighttime dipping of blood pressure.
Right, and that leads me to a big question. Why do we want our blood pressure to dip at night in the first place? I mean, I know it rests, but what's the actual biological need for it to drop?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to protecting your vascular system. Every time your heart beats, the physical force of the blood flowing through your arteries creates mechanical friction. Shear stress.
Oh, like water blasting through a hose.
Exactly. And over a lifetime, high shear stress causes microscopic damage to the arterial walls, triggering inflammation. So, by actively altering its filtration dynamics to dump sodium and lower blood volume at night, the kidney clock forces a blood pressure dip of about 10 to 20%.
Giving the blood vessels a break.
It's an obligatory recovery period. It allows the vascular tissue to repair itself. Without this nocturnal dip, if your pressure stays high all night, your cardiovascular risk skyrockets.
So the kidney's independent clock is literally acting as a shield for our heart while we sleep.
Literally protecting your heart. Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like a logistical nightmare. I mean, if the kidneys have their own independent ticking clocks, aren't they basically rogue agents? How do they avoid falling totally out of sync with the master clock in the brain?
Right. You don't want your kidney thinking it's noon when your brain thinks it's midnight.
Yeah, exactly.
So the central clock in the brain, the SCN or suprachiasmatic nucleus, acts as the master synchronizer. It's the conductor of the orchestra. It communicates with the kidney's local clocks via autonomic nerve connections and endocrine signals, hormones.
Okay, so it sends chemical memos down to the kidney.
Precisely. A great example is aldosterone, which is a hormone controlling sodium handling. When the brain releases it, it travels to the kidney and operates specifically through the core clock gene, period 1, or PER1.
Wait, so the hormone goes into the kidney cell and actually touches the clock mechanism?
Yes, it manually adjusts the factory. It ensures the local renal clock stays synced to the brain's light-dark cycle.
Wow. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, because the research shows there's another major factor for in training or, setting the kidney clock. And it's not light, and it's not the brain. It's the feeding fasting cycle.
Yes, this is a massive piece of the puzzle.
Just to clarify this for you listening. So light sets the master clock in our brain, but our food, the actual timing of our meals, sets the clock in our kidneys.
What's fascinating here is how exquisitely sensitive the local organ clocks are to nutrient availability. When you consume a meal, you introduce a massive metabolic load. The pancreas releases insulin, and that insulin actually triggers a signaling pathway in the kidney cells.
Let me guess, it hits the PER and CRY proteins.
Exactly. The insulin surge accelerates the degradation of the PER and CRY repressor proteins. It fundamentally alters the concentration of the clock proteins, effectively fast-forwarding or rewinding the localized cellular clock.
That is wild. It's a biochemical signal yelling at the kidney like, hey, food is here, we are in the active phase, fire up the pumps.
Right. The systemic inputs from the brain and the external factors from our eating habits basically collaborate to keep this local renal clock perfectly on schedule. Well, when they're collaborating. Because this brings us to the problem, right? We've established this beautifully synchronized system. But what happens when modern life throws a wrench into the gears?
The gears break down. We enter a state of chronodisruption.
And what does that actually look like for the kidney? Like, say, for someone doing shift work or someone with a genetic mutation affecting these clocks.
Disruption of these local clocks is directly linked to accelerated renal damage. It impairs how the kidney handles electrolytes and leads directly to hypertension.
Because the nighttime blood pressure dip isn't happening.
Exactly.
Mm.
But it's worse than just high blood pressure. When your brain is signaling that it's night, but you're working and eating, so your kidney clock is signaling that it's day, the organ is fundamentally working against the systemic state of the body.
The brain is saying rest, the kidney is saying filter.
Right. And that conflicting signaling causes massive cellular stress. Over time, that chronic molecular stress triggers inflammatory pathways, leading to microscopic scarring of the renal tissue. The clock misalignment is actively destroying the organ. So what does this all mean for us day to day? Beyond just the scarring, which is terrifying, this brings us back to the very first thing we talked about, the medication.
Yes, chronotherapy.
Right, the idea of timing our pharmacological treatments to actually sync with the body's internal clocks. Because the kidney's clock influences pharmacokinetics, like how drugs are metabolized and excreted.
Exactly. Because the local clock dictates the expression of the transporter pumps that clear drugs from your blood. If you take a pill, when those specific pumps are at their peak 24-hour expression...
It clears out perfectly.
Right. But if you take that exact same pill 12 hours later, when the kidney's clock has shut those pumps off to conserve energy...
The drug just hits a bottleneck. It builds up in the blood. So taking a pill at 8 a.m. versus 8 p.m. isn't just about what's easiest to remember. The kidney might literally process it completely differently based on where it is in that 24-hour PER and CRY factory cycle.
This raises an important question about how we practice medicine. We treat the human body as a static vessel, but it's really a constantly shifting metabolic landscape. This fundamentally changes how we should view sleep, pharmacology, and work schedules in relation to organ health.
It really does. It's an entire paradigm shift. So just to recap the journey we've been on today, we explored the tiny CLOCK and BML1 proteins keeping time in every renal cell. We saw how they regulate those transporter pumps to drive our blood pressure dips and manage our sodium levels. We learned how the central brain clock and our daily meals actually sync the whole system together. And we discovered why the specific timing of our medication matters so much.
It's an incredibly complex architecture, and, building strictly on the fact that feeding fasting cycles are so crucial for entraining the kidney clock, it leaves us with a pretty heavy hypothetical to think about.
Oh, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Well, imagine the master clock in your brain is telling your body it's midnight because it's dark outside, but you just ate a really heavy late-night meal.
Like a midnight pizza.
Exactly. That meal triggers an insulin spike that tells your kidney clock it's daytime. By doing that, are you inadvertently forcing your internal organs into a constant localized state of jet lag?
Localized organ jet lag. Wow. Your brain is in New York, but your kidneys are in Tokyo.
Precisely. Pitting your cellular biology against your central nervous system.
That is going to make me think twice about the ticking clocks inside me the next time I reach for a midnight snack or, a morning pill. Thank you so much for exploring this with me. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.